task force, Mr. Vargas, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And again, thank the witnesses for being here, and I also welcome all the young people that I see in the audience today. As you know, the President has repeatedly called for the Fed to lower interest rates, often citing the cost of our interest payments on the national debt as a reason why. This is in effect an ask for the Fed to monetize the debt. And we, in fact, heard from you the history from, I don't remember exactly who it was, of Truman basically doing the same thing and saying we can't continue to do this. So isn't this an explicit contradiction, though, of the principles that was set out in the Treasury Fed Accord? I mean, it seems to be exactly what we said we wouldn't do. Would anyone like to handle it? Yes, Mr.
The commentator opens with intensity, immediately locking in the audience with a sharp and urgent tone. He leans forward and makes it clear this isn't just another boring economic hearing. This is about money, power, and decisions that quietly shape the future of every citizen, whether they realize it or not.
Mr. Lecker.
Sure.
Dr. Lecker, I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. So we need money supplied by the Federal Reserve. The logical way for the Fed to issue it is to have it backed by Treasury securities. I've advocated bills only, but there's other approaches. So we have to monetize some debt. The question is how much. The call to make the path of overnight interest rates that the Fed sets lower than it otherwise would be for reasons other than the management of inflation and employment suggests the resort to inflationary finance, which is depreciation of the value of outstanding federal debt and essentially inflicting capital losses on them, which is a gain to the Treasury. After major wars are typically financed in part through inflationary finance, and that's what you want to avoid in peacetime.
Right. But and it also goes against, doesn't it, Dr. Mr. English, doesn't that go against the accord, though? Isn't that exactly what we're trying to attempt not to do?
So I'm not so sure it goes against the accord, except in the sense that the accord took us back to the Banking Act of 1935. I think it does go against the Banking Act of 1935. The point of that was the Fed should be independent of the president. The concern there was, one of the main concerns there was exactly monetization, and that the president, if he could, would be inclined to keep rates low and to ease funding pressures on the government.
Now, you stated a premise that we all kind of agreed on the independence of the Fed. I'm not sure that that's true, but let's see, is that true? Do you think that the Fed should be independent? Is anyone in disagreement?
Well, I think the Fed should be independent. I also think the Fed should act independently. And one of my concerns is the Fed has, in a sense, under what I call the implicit mandate of having very stable, liquid Treasury markets, has in fact, shall we say, relinquished some of that independence to make sure interest rates are stable and that the new Treasury debt that's issued every month is easily absorbed without spiking interest rates. Now, if you have an independent Fed and you're worried about inflation as something ahead, then you would say no to that. You would say to Congress and to others, to the Treasury, we cannot do that without risking inflation. We need to get an understanding here. And the Fed has to do that and be independent, not just say they're independent.
Right. No, I agree. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
That we do want, that's exactly what we want, though, the
Right.
independent. Yes, Dr.
Sorry, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the Fed has shown considerable independence in the last few years. As Tom said, the Fed's balance sheet reached $9 trillion. It's now about 6.5. Yeah. It's actually shrunk the balance sheet a fair amount. The Treasury has had to issue.
And there's been tremendous pressure on the Fed, and the chairman there, I think, has acted incredibly nobly and admirably to keep the independence of the Fed going. So yeah, I agree. Since I have less than a minute, I do want to ask, because you've talked about history here, what was in 1950 something, under Eisenhower, what was the top marginal tax rate? Dr. Huther, you go ahead, because I think you probably know the answer.
I'm not sure I could put a specific numbers on it, but it'd probably be close to 90%.
90%, yeah. And that was under a Republican government. What was the effective tax rate for the top 1%? effective tax rate?
Effective,
It
again,
was in the 40s to the 50s. Anyway, I just bring that out because we do have a fiscal problem in our country, and people continue to cut taxes for the wealthy, and we're not going to balance our budget doing that. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman has interesting economics. The gentleman from India.
He begins by explaining that what just unfolded is a high-level debate over something most people don't pay attention to, the Federal Reserve and interest rates. But according to him, this is where the real game is played. He frames it as a battle over who truly controls the economy, elected officials or an independent central bank. He walks through the key moment where the discussion centers on calls for lowering interest rates. He explains that lowering rates might sound good on the surface, cheaper loans, easier borrowing, but warns that it comes with deeper consequences. In his view, pushing the central bank to lower rates for political reasons risks long-term instability. The commentator then highlights the concept of monetizing the debt, breaking it down in simple terms. He explains that it essentially means creating money backed by government debt, something that can quietly reduce the value of money over time. He frames this as a hidden tax, one that people don't vote on but feel through rising prices. As the discussion turns to history, he leans in. He explains that past leaders faced similar temptations, especially during times of crisis like wars. But he emphasizes the warning raised in the hearing. What might be justified in extreme situations can become dangerous if used during normal times. He then focuses on the idea of Federal Reserve independence. He stresses that the entire system was designed to prevent political pressure from controlling economic decisions. In his view, once politics starts dictating interest rates, the system begins to lose credibility. The commentator acknowledges that some argue the central bank has maintained independence, pointing to actions like reducing its balance sheet. But he raises a key concern, whether subtle pressures still influence decisions behind the scenes, especially when government debt continues to grow. Shifting gears, he addresses the surprising turn toward tax policy. He explains that the discussion referenced historical tax rates, noting that in the past, top earners faced significantly higher rates. He frames this as part of a larger debate about how to handle the country's fiscal challenges. He emphasizes that the real issue is the growing national debt and how to deal with it. He lays out the competing approaches: raising taxes, cutting spending, or relying on monetary policy. Each option, he says, comes with trade-offs that affect different groups of people. As he builds toward the conclusion, his tone becomes more serious and reflective. He argues that these debates may seem technical, but they directly impact inflation, job markets, and the cost of living. He warns that decisions made in rooms like this often take years to fully play out, but when they do, the effects are widespread. He closes by urging viewers to pay attention to these discussions, emphasizing that economic policy isn't just for experts, it affects everyone. The final note is clear. Understanding these issues is key to understanding where the economy is headed.